This week's Farm Basics is brought to you by satshot.com. Satellites aren't just for NASA anymore. Use the power of satellite imagery to create variable rate management zones in your fields. To reduce input costs and increase yields on your farm, go to satshot.com.
During our Farm Basics time today, we thought we'd talk a little about residue. It's a fun topic, Darren.
Absolutely. You know, when a corn crop grows and farmers harvest the corn and take that away, there's a whole great big plant and a great big root system that's left in the field. And you may be wondering, well, what happens with all that stuff? Because there's going to be maybe a soybean crop out there next year and all those corn stalks aren't going to do any good, are they?
Yep, but by the next summer, a lot of times all that residue just disappears. Where does it go?
Well, in fields, it's pretty easy to see. When all the residue disappears and you're left with black soil, you say, wow, all that residue is gone. What happened? Well, there are soil life, soil bacteria, soil microbes, and also earthworms and other little insects that are out there in the field. That's what they like to do. That's their food source. They're going to eat this residue 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, as long as the temperature is above freezing.
So what ends up happening is a lot of the bacteria will break down the residue. A lot of the earthworms will actually take that residue. They'll come up to the soil surface and they'll pull it down into their little earthworm burrows, and they'll end up moving a lot of that stuff down in the soil, and eventually that will decay as well. Well, where we see a big difference out in fields is if farmers have done tillage or if they've left their fields without any tillage. And in this field, for example, we've only had one pass come through here when we were applying liquid manure, injecting the manure about 8 inches deep. And so you don't see near as much residue out here, but there's still a lot left. But just now, because we have turned some of that soil over, buried some of the residue, it really gets going in terms of the breakdown. In other words, there won't be much of this residue left at all come June of next year. Had we done absolutely no tillage out here, there'd still be a fair amount of residue left by June. So why is that? Why do we see such a difference when we do tillage?
Well, soil is a living, breathing thing. When you're holding a handful of soil, you're literally holding millions of microorganisms. And once you get some soil on an exposed piece of residue, it's going to break down that much faster than if that residue stayed clean.
Why?
Well, again, soil is a living, breathing thing, and now you've just splashed millions of microorganisms right on top of that residue to start eating it.
Yep, and when you've got some of that residue that ends up getting down into the soil, that you stir that around, you have a lot more bacteria just coming in contact with the residue. It just breaks down a lot faster. A lot of people will talk about it kind of like adding fuel to the fire, and when you add oxygen into that soil, it really gets a lot of breakdown of that organic matter very quickly.
The other thing is adding nitrogen to the situation can speed things up as well, because plant residue is very high in carbon and low in nitrogen. And for these soil microorganisms to feed on this residue, they need some nitrogen as well, in addition to the carbon that they'll get from the stalks to be able to make their proteins and make their foods. So if you want residue to break down quicker, just add a little bit of nitrogen to the equation to get the balance right in your soils, and things will take care of themselves very quickly.
One other thing I did want to add about this residue, when it's breaking down, it's not just trash. A lot of people will talk about residue as trash, but something like this old corn stalk right here, it contains lots of nutrients, especially potassium, but it also has a little bit of nitrogen, phosphorus, micronutrients, sulfur. It's got a lot of good stuff in it. And as the bacteria break this down in the soil, eventually it releases some more nutrients for the next crop. So it's a good thing when this residue breaks down.
So you may be asking, if all these nutrients are in the stalks and you can break it down quicker by doing some tillage, why don't we till all the stalks underneath to really speed this process up?
Exactly. We want to get all these nutrients available, but here's the other side of the coin. If we have the soil perfectly black, we do lots of tillage out here, break the residue down really quick, yeah, we have those nutrients available right away. But the problem is now we're much more subject to have wind erosion and water erosion or rainfall erosion, and we don't want to lose our valuable soil here. So we want to leave a lot of the residue out in the field. That'll help hold the soil in place so we don't have the erosion problems, we don't have the loss. The other thing, when we have some residue left out here, we catch a little more snow in the wintertime, and for us that's a good thing because we live in a dry area of the country. So we want to catch a little snow, get a little more moisture going into the spring.
Well, plant residue is very useful in fields. It breaks down naturally due to the soil microorganisms and things like earthworms that feed on residue. Well, unfortunately, all those things aren't breaking down our weeds quite as fast. Weeds like our weed of the week can be a big problem. Can you identify it?